Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into something a little spooky that can turn even the best Agile teams into the shuffling undead. Yep, we're talking about Zombie Scrum. So, have you ever been on a team that, looks alive on the outside? You've got all the meetings, all the roles, but deep down, it just feels lifeless? A team that's just kind of shuffling along, going through the motions? Let's ask the really tough question. Is your Agile team undead? And this quote right here, it absolutely nails it. See, Zombie Scrum isn't some totally different thing. It's Scrum. All right, but it's a hollowed-out version. It's missing that one vital organ, the beating heart of valuable, working software that actually gets delivered. Think of it like this. A Zombie Scrum team does all the rituals. They do the planning, they have their stand-ups, they do reviews. But the whole thing is pointless. There's no valuable outcome. And what's maybe even worse, there's absolutely no real desire to get better. It's just doing the process for the sake of the process. All right, so how can you tell if you're in the middle of an outbreak? Well, the first step is to diagnose the problem by spotting the key symptoms. Okay, symptom number 1, and this is the big one we just talked about. No beating heart. In healthy Scrum, that continuous flow of done, working software is everything. But for zombie teams, it's a nice to have. Something you can always just push to the next sprint. The pulse is either super weak or it's gone completely. All right, next up, these teams basically live in a bubble. They have zero desire for contact with the outside world. They avoid customers, they avoid stakeholders. And hey, if the product doesn't meet expectations, you'll hear things like, well, I'm just here to code. They see themselves as this tiny, disconnected piece of a much larger machine. Symptom number 3 is just nothing. A total lack of emotion. When a sprint is successful, there's no joy. When a sprint fails, there's no frustration. It's just this empty, numb resignation. You see items getting carried over to the next sprint without anyone even blinking. And why would they? And that brings us to the last big symptom. There is zero drive to get better. The retrospectives, if they even happen, just become these boring complaint sessions where nothing ever changes. The team feels totally powerless, like nothing they do even matters. So what happens? They just stop trying. Okay, so we know what it looks like, but this infection doesn't just appear out of nowhere, right? Let's dig a little deeper now and try to uncover the root causes of a Zombie Scrum outbreak. Well, a few common culprits tend to pop up again and again. First, you've got something called cargo cult Scrum. This is when teams just copy the practices, like, oh, we should do a daily stand-up, without ever getting the principles behind them. Then there's just a lack of urgency, which usually comes from having really fuzzy goals. And finally, the whole organization might just have values that completely clash with an agile way of working. One of the sneakiest causes is when a team does it to themselves. It's called cherry picking. They find that doing Scrum by the book is, it's painful. So they make these little tweaks that slowly poison the whole thing. They'll extend a sprint to get something done, cancel a review because they have nothing to show, or skip a retrospective because there's no time. It's all about avoiding those difficult conversations. Now, this next one is a huge one, and it often comes from outside the team, the contracts. Those traditional fixed scope contracts, they're basically built on a foundation of mistrust. They create this us versus them relationship between the customer and the team, and that just suffocates the collaboration that good, healthy Scrum needs to survive. And all of this really leads to what one professor called the smell of the place. Just think about it. What's the vibe in your organization? Is it an environment of constraint and control? Or is it one that encourages big goals, offers real support, and operates on trust? One of those smells breeds zombies. The other one fosters life. All right, I know this all sounds pretty bleak, but don't worry, there's hope. Once you've figured out what's wrong and you understand the causes, you can start looking for the cure. So let's find the antidote. First things first, you've got to talk to people. Become a zombie whisperer. The team is rarely happy with how things are, and it's so important to remember this is an organizational problem, not just the team's fault. You can also bring in some healthy examples, maybe an experienced coach, or you could even take the team on a safari to see how another company does it well. Tapping into the bigger community for some fresh ideas can be a real game changer too. At the end of the day, you have to do something to shake the team out of that slow zombie shuffle. Try shortening the sprint length to force a faster feedback loop. Make the sprint goal the absolute center of every single daily Scrum. Go out and invite real customers to the sprint review to get that honest, raw feedback. And please, use the retrospective to dream big instead of just complaining about the same old problems. But if you want a really powerful antidote, you have to go after one of those root causes we talked about earlier. It's time to completely change how your organization works with customers by embracing what's called agile contracting. So, how does it work? Well, it's actually pretty simple. You start small. Instead of signing some massive year-long contract, the customer and the team just agree to do one single sprint. That's it. This one small act immediately starts building a real relationship based on delivered value, not just a bunch of promises on paper. Okay, so next, instead of selling a specific list of features, you're actually selling access to the entire team for one sprint. A stable team has a pretty known velocity, so they have a predictable cost. In this example, let's say it's 40,000 euros a sprint. Right away, that gives everyone total transparency for budgeting and planning. No surprises. And because you know exactly how much each sprint costs, the team can give a pretty good forecast for the whole project. Maybe it'll take between 5 and 7 sprints. And here's the best part. The customer can decide to stop buying sprints at any time they feel the value isn't worth the cost anymore. This puts them completely in control, and it aligns everyone's interests perfectly. All right, so you've found the cure, you've brought the team back from the brink. That's awesome. But how do you keep them from getting infected again? Let's talk about staying immune. The absolute key is to manage the environment. That smell of the place we mentioned earlier. You have to make the invisible visible. One really great idea is to create a smellometer that actually tracks whether the environment is leaning more towards control or support, constraint or stretch. By making these smells totally transparent, everybody can work together to improve the context before zombification can even set in. And that really brings us to the big takeaway question for you to think about. Seriously, take a second and think about your own environment. Is it a place that fosters trust and lets people stretch? Or is it a place that defaults to control and just keeping people in line? What smell is your workplace creating?